Hi everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make a cathedral window block, and I'm going to just start and then break and then come back because it's going to have some sewing in the middle. This video is available to anyone on YouTube, but I am making it specifically for the Two Rivers Quilt Guild of the Easton Area Public Library. And so I'll be referring probably to things that will only make sense to them. So this is not a general video on making cathedral window blocks. This is block 10 of our sampler quilt. And I want to show you before I start, what a typical traditional cathedral window block looks like. I think it's one of the most elegant blocks, one of the most elegant quilts, and it looks very complicated. It's actually not, although it does call for quite a bit of precision. So that is a traditional cathedral windows quilt, and each of these little pieces is one of the blocks. So let's get started. The cutting is very straightforward. You will need 21 squares of your focus fabrics, and you will need 20 identically sized squares of your background. Now, some people like to use the brighter fabrics as the background with a white or a black or a solid in the middle. Whatever you choose, you'll see as you go. Some of us are making 18-inch blocks. This is a 16 patch, 4 by 4. So if you are making an 18-inch block, each block will be 1/4 of that size, which is 4.5 inches. So you will cut 5-inch squares, because remember we have to leave 1/4 inch all the way around the edges. So you will cut 21 5-inch squares and 20 background squares. These look like triangles only because they're folded. You will be cutting 20 background squares at 5 inches and 5 inches. If you are making a 12-inch block, then each of your small pieces will finish at 3 inches, and you will cut 3.5-inch squares. So 21 3.5-inch squares and 20 3.5-inch squares of your background fabric. The layout is a little tricky until you get it. So let's focus down here. So the first thing you want to do, you can use all the same fabric and just cut all your squares the same. You can cut from several fabrics. You don't have to. I happen to have 21 different fabrics because I was lucky enough to have a little, is that called a layer cake? I don't think so. Anyway, a set of 5-inch squares. So first thing I did was I selected my 5 favorites. These I liked because they had a lot of design and pretty colors. So these are my 5 favorites. I am putting those aside. These are the colors you will see the most of. They will be the most bold, the most featured in the quilt. So then I now have 16 of these, and I'm going to lay them out in a 16 patch square, which is 4 by 4. And yes, I fussed around a bit to get what I wanted. You will notice that my 4 middle patches are going to all have that same pattern in different colors, that little check. And I did that because those are going to have the least showing They're just going to have little, I think they're called orange slices in quilting. And so I fussed a bit. You know, I think this is wrong. I probably will fuss more. But you lay out your 16 squares. Then you take 20 of your background squares and let me say, cutting these, I didn't have to cut these, they were pre-cut. Cutting these to exactly the correct shape and size will matter in the end. You want this, because it's such an elegant block, you want it to line up really as perfectly as you can. The same with these. You want to cut them really as best you can, and you want to fold them in half on the diagonal as precisely as you can. And the way we're going to start is we're going to place 4 of these with their points going out. And this diamond in the middle. Now, we are going to do, why is that wrong? Yes. We're going to do the same thing on the inside. So that uses up 8, and I still have 12 left. So each of these will get the same design. Do you see you have 1 here of 4, 1 here of 4, one here of 4, and for the other 2 as well. At this point, you might want to take a photo of the video or a screenshot. Stop the video and take a screenshot so you see what you want to have before you sew. The next step is to sew, as we would always do, the rows across and then all of those rows to each other. The trick here is to be sure that this is precisely lined up. I want to just show you what you don't want to see. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see this sticking out a bit. You really want this to come right, this point to come right to the middle of that corner, and this point to come right to the middle of that corner. That is going to make it so much easier when you finally pull this back to make that beautiful curve in the block. So this is going to be very neatly attached. You can pin, you can clip, whatever you do to be precise. And then this one, you will also set up as perfectly as you can. And you will flip it onto here and make your seam here and open it. And you will get something that looks kind of like this. And these points will give you room for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can see mine don't come together because I'm waving them around in the air, but they will, when they're sewn, match up very nicely. Well, that really didn't work at all. They'll match up really nicely here at this point, below here, so that you have the 1/4 inch seam allowance. If it works like this, and you sew a nice 1/4 inch seam, it will work when it's sewn. Then I'm going to do this one, line it up, attach it neatly, pin or clip, sew it to this, and then add this one, sew it to this. And I'm going to do that for each horizontal line. And then I will sew this line to this line, this line to this line, and last I will sew down the center. Now you might wonder what happens to these. Believe it or not, they are going to sit right on top of this. And these pieces eventually will curl over them to hide their raw edges and make them the centerpieces of your quilt block. I want to give you one warning about this. You can see that it's going to be a lot thicker than a typical quilt block. There are a lot of layers of fabric. So if you incorporate this into your quilt, it will be thicker than the other blocks in your quilt. And if that's going to bother you, you may want to pick something entirely different for your quilt. I hope you'll try this. It makes a beautiful pillow. It makes a beautiful table mat. I think I'm going to use mine in one of those ways. The other thing is when you press your seams, all seams that are pressed in this block are pressed open. The reason for that is because there's so many thicknesses of fabric, the best way to reduce that is to press them open rather than have all of the thicknesses on one side of the seam. So I'm going to come back after I have sewn to here, sewn all of these bits together. And then I'll come back and we'll keep going on this block.